Welcome to the Essence of Leadership series. I am so excited to introduce this series to each person today. Now, my very first guest is Dr. Jillian Whatley. Now, I want to make sure I include all of the details about Dr. J, at least that's what I call her. Dr. J has been in the education corporate space for several years. She's an adjunct professor. She's a psychologist and most importantly, an amazing mom. Now, Dr. J is my first guest, and my hope is that you are able to glean some takeaways from Dr. J's journey on leadership. And we're just going to dive right into the interview. So, Dr. J, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to do this interview with you. And yeah, I mean, I just appreciate your time. And did I leave anything out on your bio that you want to share?
We can delve into my leadership path, and I think as we have this conversation, things will just come out about the path and the strategic moves that I made. And I'm just happy to be here to have this conversation. I think it's an important one, particularly as we embark upon Women's History Month. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So you said it, so let's just get right to it. So Dr. J, how long have you been working in a leadership capacity? And I say that because you have different industries that you work within.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will say this. I am not a title driven leader. I think leadership is something that is in some ways innately born. Some of us are just natural born leaders. And so as a child, I held multiple leadership positions, even in elementary school, middle school, president of my seventh grade class, went on to college and was a campus queen, Miss United Negro College Fund. So when I speak on leadership, it's not necessarily title driven, but in terms of specific titles, I was the former coordinator of psychological services and behavior programs in Atlanta Public Schools. I went on to be the executive director of student services in Clark County School District, where that role sat and reported to the superintendent. So I would say altogether specific leadership roles, that was a span of almost about roughly 7, 8 years. And then now I'm working in an ed tech space, almost 3 years, where I'm the director of professional learning for an entire region. And so, continuing to do leadership work as it relates to other organizations that I'm a part of as well. Additionally, I am a psychologist. So I started out as a teacher and quickly realized that I like to deal with more of the mental spaces of people. So I've been a psychologist for, oh God, over 15 years in that space as well, and in multiple types of venues, I would say, not just in one like school space. I've done work in other spaces as well. So I kind of operate in two careers.
Right, right. Right. Well, you mentioned that you were a professor at one time.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to kind of hit on that a little, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
That's a special space because
Yeah.
typically, I know me working as an executive coach in leadership and developing leaders, I've seen a lot of new and emerging leaders, right? Those will be the people that are in your classroom.
Oh,
They
yeah.
sometimes don't understand leadership. Was that your experience when you were working with them, that they thought it was title driven?
So I've worked with undergrad as well as graduate students. And so some of my graduate students are strictly wanting to be school psychologists. But for those who are in my leadership classes, those students are, it's a mix, right? I think that a lot of them may come with this top down leadership approach where they are the boss and then the people are supposed to acquiesce to what they say. And then you have folks that are a little bit more team approach with their leadership style. Yes, they are the person in charge, but they really kind of build a team that capitalizes on their weaknesses and their strengths as the leader. So I kind of see two types of students. I would say right now in my cohort, we're doing a lot of work around being more self reflective as a leader and what do you bring to the space and bring to your leadership and your leadership style, and knowing your multiple types of leadership styles. Because to say that you're just a servant leader may be great, but that may not be the only type of leadership style you need to prescribe to. So yeah, I see a different types of leaders. Yeah.
That's awesome. And thank you for sharing about the multiple types, because on my end, by me working, in the leadership development space, I'm catching them after they graduate as they make that transition.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they've been asking, what does it mean to have a leadership style? Like I don't
Yeah.
know what my style is. So it's definitely I find it interesting that you guys are having those conversations early on, which is very important for,
Absolutely.
yeah, they need that understanding as they transition into their roles wherever they are,
Mm-hmm.
to know that there's different styles to leadership and you can adapt those to work
Mm-hmm.
you and your team.
Absolutely. I think it's critical. And I think we tend to default to what's natural for us.
Right.
For me, I know transactional leadership is not one that you like to employ a lot, because if you stay in the transactional space, then people don't feel like you care about them, or there's something missing in terms of the human interaction. But then if I have to get transactional, I need to know how to do that, right?
Right.
When that needs to be executed, I need to know how to execute that as well. So just knowing that there are different styles and that you may have to use different styles for different types of situations and even different people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's important too, because as they rise in their careers, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to encounter different types of people, different age groups of people,
Yeah,
and knowing how to relate with those people and to not necessarily boss the team, like you said, with that top-down effect, right? It's more of inspire the team to follow you. You
absolutely.
have to understand what style to use with certain employees.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think even with the workforce changing too, people are no longer, just because you're the boss, they're going to follow you.
Right.
You have to have, and I would say this to a lot of people, some level of street cred as a leader. If for me as a psychologist, people really respected me because they knew my first job was leading psychologists and behavior folks, but they knew that I was a psychologist before that had worked in alternative schools, a psychologist that worked in traditional schools, a psychologist that had evaluated students from early childhood through 12th grade. And so they knew I came with a wealth of information and knowledge about the said field. And the same goes for leadership, is that, folks want to see that you've been around the block a couple of times as well. Not to say that someone who hasn't, but there has to be some level of credibility there, to really give you that platform to say, I can kind of see where you're coming from. Let me give you some advice on that, or tell you how to work through those different, especially difficult situations that you may have with folks who report to you, or people who you work cross-functionally with, other leaders that you have to work on teams. That is, it's important to kind of sometimes draw on your own experiences, and people really value that.
Oh yes, absolutely. Now you said something that has me intrigued. Now you said on the journey, right, that you had to get some street cred. What were some challenges, at least one or two, that you faced when you were building your leadership experience?
Hmm. Um, I think early on, people tend to see leaders as titles, especially in the space of education. And so for me, coming from a childhood where leadership was essentially poured into me, and, I was the president of my youth ministry at church. I was the president of my seventh grade class. I was in so many leadership roles as a young child, that for me, I didn't really see it as a title. I saw it more as a skill. And so when you come into a space where you're young, for example, And when I remember starting out as a psychologist, sometimes people are a little more hesitant to listen to you as a psychologist because you, one, don't have a child and you're evaluating children. So you have to develop some level of street cred with those parents for them to be able to even listen to you being the expert on child development. And so I found myself really drawing on my experience as a child working in summer camps and just, really connecting with parents. And then also, I will say really early on, just listening to parents as well, even though they were coming to me with some challenges with their kid, but really listening to things that they had tried and kind of understanding that parental journey from just a parent perspective that has nothing to do with me being an expert. One thing I know is that you can be an expert, but you never take away another person's expertise because they are living that experience. And so I don't ever want someone to feel like I just know a lot. And I took that skill into my actual leadership roles. Like listening first is a critical component. I don't really care what school you went to and what experiences you've had, are they're valued, but in that space, it may be different because you're dealing with different people, you're in a different organization. And so you have to quickly listen and understand the culture that you're becoming a part of. So I would say my earlier challenge was being young and not having kids in the education space. And then my second challenge was, because I'm such a leader, is yielding and listening more. And so that's something now, gosh, I would say I probably listen a lot more than I even speak now. And that can be taken either way. But I think you get more by just listening, gathering information, then acting before coming in as the direct expert or all knowing of all things. That's just my opinion.
No, I thank you for sharing. In the age one, definitely, I talk to so many young leaders. That's what made me ask you about your class, right? Because those
Yeah.
people sometimes climb their career ladders very fast. And then
Yeah.
people are kind of judging them because of their age.
Yeah.
And the second one about listening, sometimes they're coming in like, I've studied this. I have this degree. I went to this school.
Yeah.
Sometimes that I'll say the demeanor negates other people's experiences. So you definitely,
Absolutely.
yeah, I see that a lot in that space when I'm talking to a lot of new and emerging leaders. So thank you for
Absolutely.
confirming that. And I guess I'll ask you too, like, as you've been through these different, phases of your career,
Yeah.
if you're comfortable, what is a setback you had and you were like, I gotta find my way back from this situation?
Well, I think a setback, and I don't know if I would call it a setback, but for the sake of the question, in my previous leadership role, it was during COVID and during civil unrest. And I think Black women or women of color experienced a lot of stress during that time in high level positions. So during that time, let me set it up for you. I was the executive director of student support services, and that role reported to the superintendent. So a part of that was I had critical divisions that reported to me, one being nursing. It was front and center during the pandemic, getting kids back to school. The other was discipline. Anytime there's a sweep in police reform, you're going to find that there's going to be a sweep in discipline reform in schools. And other areas fell within that my purview, as well as roles and responsibilities with the school board. And so there were, I was experiencing some pushback, and I'll go ahead and say it, from white women who were not wanting to either cross-functionally work with me as a Black woman, or who did not want to, because the board was making, they were asking and requesting for two divisions to be added under me. And two white women did not want their departments to report to me. As a result, that was a very stressful time. And what I learned from that was I'm real clear there's just some people who don't want to see you be successful for whatever reason. But I have made a commitment that I'm not going to be an emotional slave to your stuff that you have in your personal, whatever that is, or even professional mind, right? I do realize that racism and sexism is very much alive. I think I knew it, of course, before that experience. But I think with the backdrop of COVID and with so much going on politically during that time, people's masks quickly fell off, and they were exactly who I thought they were. And so I didn't see it as necessarily like a setback, but I do see it as like a very pivotal point in my career and my professional development. You could not have taught me in any class about that experience with direct institutional racism at the hands of so much. No one could have taught me about that experience. Yeah, you could have given me maybe some tips or told me about your experience, but going through that myself has definitely prepared me for other situations that I have encountered or that I see. I see it much quicker, much sooner, and in a different savvy way. And yeah, for some people, women of color are a threat. It's a fact. And, that's something that I think young professionals, especially my young men and women of color, they have not had that direct contact with racism, that may have been protected by racism. When you see it in the workplace, it can be daunting to you. No matter if you're an advocate against it or you're an ally, until you experience it personally. Right. It changes you. It fundamentally changes you forever. And you see things from a different light.
Wow. Now you're right. During that time, it was so much happening. It was so much tension everywhere you went. So I can't even imagine what that was like to have to deal with that for even, I mean, I don't want to say a week, just dealing with it, period. In the midst of our own stuff that you were dealing with during COVID, because we all had our own stuff.
Absolutely.
That we were dealing with. So I guess in what I'm wondering though, in the midst of all that, I know you learned how to deal with, situations better today.
Absolutely.
What would be, I guess, one or two things you would share with a new and emerging leader or someone in leadership roles like this situation? It may not be the exact one, but this thing could happen to you.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and I tell my students this all the time, become a member of local organizations. Like for us as educators, can be a member of PAGE. I am a member of NAACP. I am a member of many organizations that supported me through that process so that you don't feel like you're on an island. Again, you will have a degree, but you are still a human being and you're dealing with human beings who have yet, some folks are not as reflective as you may be on their own stuff. And they bring that stuff into a workplace and it can be like a cancer, which is why there's a term called organizational trauma. It's a direct result of things such as high turnover, discrimination, workplace violence. Those things are real. And so I think that developing allyships within your organization is critical. I think it's super critical, and not just your physical organization, but like if you're an MBA, you have an MBA, your business organization where you go to conferences. If you are a mental health professional, your mental health organization where you go to conferences and really start to expand your network beyond the people that you work with in said buildings. I think that was a definite lifesaver for me because I had been doing that so long. I had been a member of PAGE since 2008. So I had enough in my PAGE account that when this case went legal, that I didn't have to pay for an attorney. An attorney was given to me by that organization. So you want to make sure that you're contributing to those organizations on a monthly basis. I think just like a doctor has malpractice insurance, you need to have whatever is equivalent to that, just in case somebody gets crazy.
Got it. Now, just to take a pivot here. Now, you've been through several, difficult situations. You've worked kind of like you said, you have two different types of industries that you work in now. I'm
Yeah.
curious as to how you measure
Yeah.
success.
Yeah. How do you measure success? Wow. Well, within our organization, in any organization you work in, you got KPIs, you have your strategic plan. By that, I measure success, and that is for the organization.
Mhm.
For me, I measure success that if I can touch and change one life, that's successful to me. I don't measure it by, I would say, money or, like I said before, titles. Um, God has definitely placed me on this earth to be
Mhm.
an impact and an influence. And when I see people that come back and I've worked with over years, oh my God, when I was so young, and they're like, I watched how you handled certain situations, Dr. Whatley, and it made me X, Y, and Z. Or thank you for helping my child in that time where everybody turned their back on them, or X, Y, Z. Those are the things that I measure my success by. And each time, and I like to say this too, because I think I posted this today, like my greatest accomplishment is having my daughter.
Okay.
Um, to be able to see the things that I'm pouring into her come to fruition. I tell even grown people, hug your mom, hug whoever had you. They did the best they could with what they had, right?
Right.
But no one teaches you how to be a parent. No
Right.
one gives you a manual. There's no course with that. And so to be able to see that everything that I'm putting in place for her works for her, and we talk about it, that's how I measure success even as a parent. But it's
Right.
not tied to some metrics, right? It's tied to maybe a biblical metric. So what my God says is success. Because what my God says is success may be very different than what man says, right? So
Right.
I'm going to do what's in the best interest of organization, but never will I ever do what's in the best interest of an organization to override what is in the best interest of my God.
Got it.
And I have said that. The other day, I was on a work trip. I landed a huge contract in Louisiana for equity-based strategic planning. And my managing partner asked me a question about what else, what my next steps would be, because he sees some things as well. And my first step, some people will come out and say, well, I've been thinking about that. I think I want to X, Y, and Z, you know what I mean? And that's good and granny. I said, well, here's some preliminary things I've been thinking about, but let me pray on that for a minute. So I take God everywhere I go, and He has been a good to me. And he's been good in helping me be a great leader for my staff, an excellent psychologist, and also a professor to those who are up and coming who still reach back for my mentorship throughout their career. So those things, I would say, Demetra, help me to say you're doing the right thing. You're on the right track. You're doing what God has you here to do. But I understand very well that in corporate America and in organizations, we got some KPIs and strategic planning goals. And I've been successful by those metrics and will continue to do what I've got to do those. But those they don't kick my spirit up like
Right.
it would be that when God says, well done, Jill, you did great with that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for sharing that, because that was going to be my part two of the question. People will quickly rattle off KPIs
Oh
or
yeah.
how many people they talk to. But
Yeah.
for you, I see, yes, I will do that, but yours seems to be more the impact, the
Yeah.
imprint that I left on this person's life, that to your point, the parents call back or the student comes back and they're like, Dr. Whatley, you've done this for me. You changed my perspective. Those things are priceless. And I think that's the gift that we have, right? When we're working in,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And um, just a few more questions. And you've been so forthcoming. And I was also going to ask you about next steps, but you share that too. So the other thing is,
Yeah.
what is it that you would tell someone? Let's say they just graduated college, they're
Oh,
transitioning into their next phase of, I'll say, professionalism, whatever that looks like for them. What
Yes,
would you say to them to get them ready for that next leadership step?
absolutely. Wow. In American culture, we tend to tout that certain things are for everybody, right? We'll say something like, the White House, the house with the picket fence. Well, everybody's not meant to be a homeowner, okay? Because with home ownership, there comes a lot of responsibility with that beyond just buying the house. So, with that train of thought, right? Not everybody's meant to be at every level of leadership in terms of a title, but you
Right.
sure can be a leader in what you do,
Right.
right? So I really try to help people understand, what are you here for? What's your purpose? Because when you know your purpose, no one can shake that no matter where you go. I don't,
Right.
you can sit at tables and people will be like, she's different because she knows what, she's not searching. But you really, I think the younger you are, and I think this goes for children young, my daughter's 12. The
Right.
earlier you can understand your purpose in life, the better you'll be able to understand your career. Your purpose and your career should be aligned. And if you're doing something that's out of alignment, it will show up in other ways. So what
Right.
ways will it show up? You're not happy on the job. You've chosen to work for a career and not for a purpose. You
Right.
didn't do your due diligence in researching that particular job you went after because you were focused on the job and not focused on the job and the culture and the climate that it rests in, right?
Right.
You didn't research the hiring manager, right?
Right.
Okay, because you can see the job, but now let's talk about the person you report to.
Right.
That's a whole different ball game because that's going to make the job either stand to test the what's on paper, or it's going to change potentially. So I would tell someone, and I do tell people who are new in the field of even leadership or psychologists, like, know your purpose, know your why, and be confident in that. And also, I would say, know that you have options. That if
Yeah.
someone is mistreating you on a job, that there are options. Gone are the days of you staying on a job and just, faking it till you make it, or staying because of a retirement, all while you are dying on the inside. No, those days are gone. Like, if you are going to find a career, make it work for you first.
Yes. Yes. Oh my
You
God.
can't go in and just be making it work for the organization and you're getting absolutely nothing out of it. Like, make it work for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we have to do a better job as leaders who've been around this block at teaching people how to go in and make it work. Look, I told somebody the other week, yeah, that's the salary they told you, but ask them about the salary that's based on your, not only your degrees, but your experience. Where's that salary? Did they show you that? So
Absolutely.
now we got to give people the ability to do what? Negotiate your salary.
Right. Right.
But teaching people that younger instead of 20 years later, I'm 46. There's a lot that I wasn't taught because of that generation, that time. And I love these conversations because emerging leaders need to hear this. And it's not going in and being arrogant. It's knowing your worth and knowing your worth and discerning whether or not the leader that you will be reporting to is going to help you be the better version of yourself as a leader, or are they going to hinder you? And yeah.
You hit the because I see that so often
Yeah.
with the salary piece, of course. And then
Mm-hmm.
it becomes I'm questioning my value and worth because so and so said I should get this. Now I'm terrified, or maybe that's not the right word, but you're uncomfortable to
Yeah.
ask for whatever the reason may be,
Yeah.
and you're disappointed in the salary. And
Yes.
now that feeling that you have just carries on throughout your time there. Now you're miserable because
Absolutely.
that happens more often than not, Dr. J. It does.
I know.
It
I
does.
am aware. And in 2024, is still, we're still experiencing what pay inequity and all these things and the things, right? The things of corporate, the things of the workforce. But when I say, and I challenge the workforce is, we're going to either, we're going to change or we won't have people working in the workforce. Because guess what? The children that are coming up now are way more entrepreneurial than we ever imagined. And they have way more skill set than we at an earlier age.
Yes.
I mean, my daughter is taking some sort of class that's like teaching her infographics. She can make an infographic that's comparable to the person who makes an infographic for my social media, and she is 12.
Wow.
So here we are, workforce folks, right? Some of the people have looked at some of her work and they work in corporate America and they say, this is what I'm doing. And I'm 40 and 50 years old.
You like, she's 12.
And she's like, right? No, and I'm like, I wasn't doing that as well. So we got a group of kids who are coming out that have skill sets that are like that of people who've gone to college.
Yes.
Because their curriculum is teaching them this at earlier ages. And so what is the workforce going to do with children who are going to be adults very quick and fast? Because I feel like we're going faster towards adulthood.
Right.
What is it going to do? What are they going to do?
Yeah, like I went out to a university. It was I want to say Clemson last year. I've been out to a few at the latter part of last year, but I went out there to talk to some graduating seniors.
Yeah.
Recently, Dr. J, why was I on a call with these same students? They just graduated and they were talking about how we could partner together. And I'm looking at them like, I think I met them before. Well, I did in December. And now these guys are out working their own businesses.
Absolutely.
I was thinking the ink isn't even dry on their degree yet, but they're out there with utilizing those skill sets that you're referring to.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I didn't think about entrepreneurship when I was graduating, but they already have events lined up and everything. And I'm like, when did you start on this? And they were like, last semester we were working on it. I didn't have the wherewithal to put anything together.
Absolutely.
At that level.
It is amazing. And if people are not paying attention, they need to pay attention.
Right. Right.
Because these folks are going to be like owning some stuff. Like, entrepreneurship. I'm living with one. She's in my house. She sells, my mother went to clean out my daughter's bedroom 2 months ago and found like a stash of like $120 or $30 because she's selling chips and making trinkets and kids are buying them in school. We didn't even know. So their mindsets, and her friends are the same way, is very entrepreneur. And so working for someone, for them, has to be well worth it.
Right.
And hear me, working for someone has to be well worth it because they will work for themselves before they work for you.
And the fear that a lot of older people have around it, and I mean older, like you could be in your 30s.
Yeah.
It's a little different from the recent graduates. They're like, hey, let's do it. I've seen so-and-so be an influencer. So-and-so's got an online store. They have all creative ideas.
They're like, what do I have to lose? Let's do it.
Right.
I'm like, I love it. And they're not as consumed with the American ideal as I think our generation was. To have a home is really not a big thing for them. They're okay living in an apartment, like 2 or 3 people. They're okay with certain things that our generation wasn't, because we were pushed to say, go to college, maybe go to graduate school, get a house and a family. They operate very different with those American ideals, which I celebrate. I think it's pretty cool.
Yes, yes. And you led me to something else in saying that. So we know based off your comment just now that one of the skill sets that a leader must have, I'll say new and emerging, and that means they may be new to leadership overall, not necessarily age, but you got to be open-minded, right? You got to be creative. Anything else you would add to that of skills that they would need to be successful?
Absolutely. Emotionally intelligent.
Okay. Oh, that's
Understanding your emotions, understanding the emotions of others, understanding how to adapt in certain situations and being fluid in that without losing yourself. But sometimes you just have to adapt. Understanding how to think, understand what another person may be thinking without what they say. But so that means reading nonverbals, becoming really astute at that, because people may be saying one thing, but they may be feeling another thing. And that emotional intelligence piece is critical. So, in essence, you can be highly intelligent and emotionally deficient. So, bringing those two to the same level is going to be a powerful person, because that emotional intelligence piece is critical, particularly when you're leading groups and teams of people, or particularly when you're working cross-functional with other folks. Heck, just knowing how to share. There's some people who don't play well in the sand. You know,
right.
I'm up here on this project with you and you're acting real crazy. No, you there's a body of research about leadership, but there's a body of research also about followership. And some people don't talk about the followership tenets or the followership research. They want to focus heavily on the leadership. Followership does not mean that you're weak, but in order to lead, you have had to follow someone. And even when you're a leader, there are times where you lead, and then there are times when you have to follow. And so that bi-directional, that fluidity is really necessary and critical when working in organizations and on teams as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you said it earlier too about the mindset of the leader. You can have
Yeah.
all of the degrees, all of these things, but if you don't have the things that we just rattled off, the emotional intelligence, the
Yeah.
creativeness, the open mind, the ability to follow as well as lead, you're not going to get very far.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, you're not.
No. Nah, you won't.
No, and your team won't engage or any of those
Mm-mm.
things, so you will be the person on the island.
Yes, you will.
Yeah. So as we begin to wrap up, I gotta ask you, what is it that you do to keep inspiring like these students, these clients to keep coming back? Because you've been doing this for several years and
Yeah.
you don't have a shortage of clientele. So what is it that Dr. J is doing to keep these people motivated to come back and to continue to work to be better people?
It's interesting because I got asked that question the other day. You know, I think that my parents raised me to see people first, humans first. Um, and I just went on to get the degrees and to tack onto that. So what does that mean? That means that I am truly a connector. I want to connect with people, and I want to connect them with other people. And I really and truly authentically want to see you do and be your best, whatever that means for you. And I think that I say that, but it must show up in my actions and in my spirit in terms of how I interact. Because somebody could say, I want the best for you, but you don't see their actions to help you get to your very best, or you don't even feel that it resonates. So, any opportunity that I see for a person, I don't have a problem like connecting and sharing, because I've realized very early that all of us can sit on this beautiful stage and we all can do beautiful work, and we all can celebrate each other and love each other. And people see that. The other thing I would say is that I really genuinely care about folks, whether it's children or adults. I really care. Now, sometimes my delivery may be harsh, but my heart is right where it needs to be,
Right.
because I care and I want to see you do the best while here on this earth. And I think that's what keeps people coming back. I'm going to say this too, Demetri. The other day I was having matter of fact, for the last couple of days, I've had some interesting conversations, but they've been the same. So I'm 46, and a lot of my mentors are way older than I am. These
Right.
people are retiring to the point where I was like, should I be retired? My mom was like, no, you're 46. She's like, you just have a lot of older people in your life, and you think that you should be retiring, but you close, but you ain't that close. I was like, oh,
Like,
shoot.
not yet, not yet, not yet.
half of my friendship circle is starting to retire, but they are older. And I did ascend in leadership very quick. Um, and even with psychologists, some of my friends have been saying this over the weekend in different friend circles that the modern psychologist is not like they were back in the day. So what does that mean? And I keep hearing this. I'm like, what does that mean? It's like folks not taking notes in session, people not really, connecting. Folks haven't had enough life experience, and you can tell by the advice that they're giving you. Hey, things are changing. So what I will say to people is, listen, there will a degree does not outweigh experience.
Right.
It will
Right.
never, because your degree is dated. Your experience is current.
Mm-hmm.
You got that degree back in 19 whatever, or even if you got it in 2022, research is constantly moving.
Right.
So that's a done dollar right there. Because guess what? Whatever they were teaching you was already old.
Yes, because it had to
So
be in the book.
it was in the
So,
book. It was in the book. If it was in the book, it's old. Okay. Unless you got a new textbook, and that was still old because it take a while to go through publishing. So now that you're in the workforce, it's time for you to really learn more, learn current, and then also get that experience under your belt and journal that. And so, those are just some of the things that I think about. I think some people stay too heavily tied to textbooks.
mhm.
I know one of my students said, well, Dr. Whatley, this book was so amazing, but it wasn't research based. I said, listen, it was her research. No research will ever trump your experience as a coach or a clinician, as a doctor or whatever. That's
Right.
your experience.
Right. Right.
And guess what? The research was their experience. They just turned it into a theory. But
Right.
new theories can emerge through current data collection processes in session and or even in leadership. So I think that's something that people can't like forget.
Right. Now, another question I have for you, the more you share, the more I'm like, I want to ask her this. So, what is it that keeps you? Because I know you read a lot. I know you're
Mhm.
an avid learner, like you said. Degrees are great, but they're dated. So,
Yeah,
what do you do to keep Dr. J in the most current information? To be able to relate to your daughter in the way that you are, being that she's 12
yeah.
with these students, like you're talking to so many different generations. So what do you do
I
to stay like abreast of what's happening?
I read a lot and I learn a lot. I'll tell you what. This is something that I thought about and been thinking about. I think working with my doctoral students and reading when I sit on dissertations, like
Mhm.
I'm sitting on three right now. I got to sit up tonight and read. And reading their stuff keeps me like really current because it's new. It's
Right,
new, it's new research. And so they don't know that while I'm helping them, they're also helping me.
right,
And then also teaching content keeps me fresh because I'm always teaching it. And if you're teaching it, you're still learning it and you may learn something new about it. But then also, Demetra, I watch people a lot. Like I am a serious people watcher. And my daughter is too. Her teacher used to call her intellectually curious. But, we're both intellectually curious. So I'm very intellectually curious. I like to know about people and how people function. So I think, yeah, with reading and then just watching folks, learning people, talking to people, that is real critical to me staying on my toes and not getting dated. And so I can come and have a conversation about the latest, whatever, because 9 out of 10, one of my doctoral students is talking about it.
right. No, that makes sense because if the more you're around students, they're constantly out there, pretty much having their ears to the street, so to speak, right? To hear what's
Absolutely.
happening, knowing what people are talking about, things we're probably oblivious to, but they're like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, did you hear about this?" You're like, "No, I didn't." But
No, I
now,
did.
now that you brought it up, I did, so I can go read this thing that you're talking about. So that's pretty awesome. And I guess I want to say, like, you shared your words of encouragement. I was checking off my list as you were sharing. So I know you mentioned that your daughter was your biggest accomplishment, your win, right?
Yeah.
When you think of, and that was probably overall, but if there was one that you could share from the classroom, And not
Really?
calling anybody's name or anything like that, but what was one big win you got from leading those classes? Because you started being a professor when you were 25. That's a
Yeah,
long time. Um, if
it
you don't
is.
mind sharing one win that you got from
Right.
there with someone and you were just like, man, I didn't realize that seed took root.
You know, quite a few of my students, I follow them and we still are in contact from, gosh, like there's a couple, I think about them right now. I remember when I was living in Maryland and they were a young couple. They were at Prince George's Community College and I was teaching a class and they took my class together. They were dating. They
Wow.
were dating then. So all that jazz with young folks, right?
Right.
They sit next to each other. I still remember it like it was yesterday. And they are married. They're in a beautiful marriage and they are both doing very well. She's an author. He is in business and they are doing well. When I see that my students have gone from like, especially like my undergrads, have
Mhm.
gone from undergrad and went on to grad to be nurses and doctor, like that, it does something to you. Or knowing that I wrote their recommendation letter to get into a doctoral program, and I get that text that says, like I got one a couple weeks ago, Dr. Whatley, I made it. Like that, nobody can capture that feeling,
Right.
like for sure. I'm like, just to see them move through and do well, it just is enough to make me cry. Because I remember when they were just so young and eager and they're just taking notes like and and just to see them go on and do well and have families, wow, that feeling is crazy. It's a rush and it makes me proud, it makes me happy, and it also makes me look at my daughter and I'm like, wow, I hope and pray that she continues to have great teachers,
Mhm.
a great professor that is not only invested in them in the classroom, but in their life.
Right.
That's the difference maker. Because you come across so many people who teach a class. That's one piece. But now you're talking about how can I help this person be the best person they can be in their lives? You're changing lives, Jill. I'm like, wow, that's cool. So yeah, those are things that just makes me giddy, like to see them have their first child, or or that's it's crazy. It's a crazy feeling. Like one of my former interns, uh, she just had a baby, and her son has my book, Where's My Teacher? And she said, Dr. Whatley, I look up and he's over there reading your book. He's only like 1.5 or 2. Like,
Right.
and she's like, he has your book like wide open. It's so cute. So we used him as a part of my social media. But like, I remember when she wasn't even married and didn't have
Right.
no kids. I remember when he was a butterfly in the butterfly land, like he wasn't even thought of. She was living her best ATL streets at Georgia State, having a good time. And so to see that, it's just like, I can't believe that, baby. So those are like my joy moments, to not only see them do well in their career, but to
Right.
see them do well in their personal lives, like, going on to, get married or just be in healthy relationships and just do well, that warms my heart.
Well, Dr. J, I want to say thank you so much for sharing. And I know, when we originally started talking about this, I wanted to, of course, interview you for Women's History Month. And now that I hear this, right, I'm thinking this is something that I want to keep doing because
Yes.
Women's History Month is only in March, right? You're making an impact every day. So, in my opinion, you are history in the making. And yes, and I appreciate you sharing your time and your
Yeah.
stories with us today. And for the audience, I have all of Dr. J's information in the copy. My hope is that you guys go look her up, check out her profile on LinkedIn. And just if you have questions, she, of course, is a wealth of information, as you can see, but definitely don't hesitate to reach out. And Dr. J, thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Demetri, for having me. And I look forward to coming back.
Most definitely, you have an open invitation.